I felt it, you know, at the end of the last episode. A disturbance in the force that comes from thousands of people simultaneously rolling their eyes back and shouting at the screen, just buy some bloody wheel arches. Now, I know sometimes it seems like we make things more complicated than they need to be, just in an effort to create more content so we can rush these videos out. This time, it's just not the case.
Project Binky in colour. Starring Nick Blackhurst. Also starring Richard Brunning. And Rex Hamilton as Abraham Lincoln.
Tonight's episode, Houses of the Holy.
And no, I have no idea how I kept a straight face then either.
Coming up in episode 14, Nick runs out of tea.
Bollocks.
A vital piece of equipment fails. And we get attacked by a rabid animal. At the end of the previous episode, Nick vetoed the use of melee arches. Like Russia at the UN Security Council, he wasn't for turning. So, where does that leave us?
So, we're not using melee arches. And it's nothing to do with the fact you can just buy them, bolt them on and it's job done, and that's far too simple. I like simple, believe it or not. It's got nothing to do with the fact I don't like them. I love them. They look great. It's got nothing to do with the fact they don't quite fit in with our OEM style that we're going for. There's that many minis out there with melee arches fitted, no one would give them a second glance. The reason I don't want to use them is purely practical. They're not a full wheel arch. I do a lot of driving in the countryside and my car gets filthy. So what I require is a full arch, kind of like this. This is a Rover Sports Pack arch, as fitted to the last 3 years of proper mini production. It's quite wide, it's full coverage, and it's OEM. It also happens to be a simple bolt-on job. So all we've got to do is bolt them on.
These aren't actually genuine Rover Sport Pack arches, as they're ludicrously expensive. These are pattern parts, and a bit flexible for super accurate mounting, so we've borrowed these genuine arches, and I think you'll all agree, they're quite green. The first job is to mask up the wing in order to give us something to mark the hole centres on. Then, just pop in the side repeater. Then mark on the top of the arch the position of the holes where they bolt to the wing. Now we can start to mark the wing up, ready for the holes. Mustn't forget to drop the hole centre down the required 7mm, and there's the finished marking ready for the drill. We've done the same on the rear arch, and now we're ready to drill lots of holes in the panels that we replaced because they had lots of holes in them. It's quite something to drill into these brand new panels. I mean, what if the holes are in the wrong place, for example? That would be a disaster. Still, I have every faith. It'll be fine. The wings are now ready to receive the new arches.
It's purely a matter of personal taste, but for me, an arched mini looks best when the tyre comes right out to meet the outside edge of the arch, or possibly sticks out just a little cheeky bit. So, let's get these bolted on and see what they look like.
With a bit of luck, these arches will bolt straight on, fit nicely, and leave us a cheeky little tyre stick out. Well, they bolted straight on, but that's about as far as it goes. Yes. Looks like we've missed cheeky, gone straight through taking the piss and into downright illegal.
Not to worry, we have a plan.
Indeed we do, and it's a plan so cunning you could put a tail on it and call it a weasel. The plan starts with making dozens of these little aluminium strips. Then we bash them with a wholly inappropriate hammer. Then we drill 2 holes in them. This is starting to make sense now, isn't it? No? Then keep watching then. After masking up the arch and marking it out, we drill and countersink a pair of holes at regular intervals all the way around. Then we throw health and safety out of the window and use a sharp craft knife to slice the arch in 2. And despite the danger, no arteries were cut during the making of this film. Do the same with the rear end, and this is the result. 2 perfectly good arches ruined.
They're not ruined yet. Having said that, take another look at this front wheel arch, something is not quite right. So we need a bit of investigation there before we go any further. So I did some head scratching, and then I did some measuring. And what I measured was the distance between the front edge of this side repeater hole and the front corner of this wing. And then I went and measured the left-hand wing on this car, and I got a different measurement. Now I know what you're thinking. That must be done for a reason. Something to do with using the same side repeater to save costs. So I went and measured a pair of wings on a car that hasn't been touched since it left the factory. We just happened to have kicking around the workshop. And both of those measurements were the same and agreed with the passenger wing on this car. So just for good measure, I went and got this wing, which is due to be put on that self-same Mini. And this is what I found.
On Binky's wing, the measurement is 380mm. On the new pattern wing and all the other wings in the workshop, it's 370mm.
So there you go. The wheel arch doesn't look quite right because, in essence, it's fitted in the wrong place. The side repeater hole we used to set it up on is about 10mm too far back in the wing. Now, that would be mildly annoying if you'd spent £40 on a reproduction wing like this. But imagine how you'd feel if you'd spent over £100 on a genuine wing like this one, so you didn't come across these problems. And then you drilled lots of holes in it, in what turns out to be the wrong place.
Well, I can tell you, we were pretty bloody miffed about the whole situation, because it meant a whole lot of welding and grinding to end up right back where we started some considerable time ago. So here's a visual representation of the issue we faced. The side repeater hole is stamped out 10mm too far back. Now we've got to fill the hole and start again. So after marking out the correct position, tracing round the hole to make a blanking plate and welding it in and finishing it off, the next step is to put the hole back in the correct position.
Ordinarily to do this, I'd probably drill as big a hole as I could get away with in the centre and then file the rest of the shape to suit. But last night I was on the Acme website looking for rockets, and I discovered that as well as their usual railway tunnels and inspection shafts, they now offer a bespoke hole service. Well, I was sceptical too, but I sent them the dimensions, and sure enough, they faxed me one over. This should make the job a lot easier, but it is a one-shot deal, so we have to make sure we get it in the right place first time. Well, that seems to have worked quite nicely, so we should just be able to fit the side repeater like that, and then we can retest fit the arch. Much better.
And here we go again. Mask it up, mark it up, drill it and bolt it on. Still, the fit looks so much better now. So now we've stopped the wheels falling off the project, we've taken the wheels off the car. And the next step is to make use of this wheel arch widening kit. It consists of a bunch of nuts and countersunk screws, a selection of hand tools and a load of those little alley strips we made earlier. Nick is bending the ends of the spacers as we want to keep the arch profile like the original, so need to keep the outer part horizontal so the bends reverse any sag from moving it outward. After bending and bolting up all 7 strips on the inner part of the arch, it's time to fit the outer part on. This is a simple task that even a monkey could do, but sadly I was unavailable at the time due to being locked in the kitchen making endless cups of tea. The gaping chasm between the two halves measures a cool 50mm, or 2 inches if you're in the colonies.
If you're looking at this thinking, I don't think that's going to make a very good wheel arch, especially with that big gap in it, well, you're probably right. However, we're not making a final wheel arch at the moment. What we're making with this is a pattern or buck of the wheel arch we want. Then we can take a mould off it and produce the final arch if we like the outcome. So if you're now thinking, or have been all along, here comes the fiberglass, well, you're nearly right. Now, fiberglass, glass fibre, GFRP, GRP, however you know it, it's messy. I'm also not sure how well it's going to bridge this big gap. So instead, we're going to use something a little bit different, something I call LRP or Lycra reinforced plastic.
I'm sure he just makes this stuff up, you know.
Okay, I may have made this up, but as you watch what's about to follow, what you need to bear in mind is, fundamentally at least, the principle we're going to use is one of the oldest methods of skinning anything from kayaks to aeroplanes. All we've done is update the materials.
We do have form with this type of technique, but it was a long time ago and it was something much smaller that didn't involve compound curves. One of the reasons it had to be small is that we've only just got the internet in Shropshire, and the primary method of getting hold of Lycra was to ambush a middle-aged cyclist and steal his shorts. The material we purchased is a heavyweight, two-way stretch cotton Lycra mix that gives us about 3/4 mil thickness, depending on how tightly it's stretched. We're going to use 2 layers to give a strong enough shell to do what we want to do. This is somewhat of an experiment, if nothing else. This is just a final tweak of the spacers to take out the rippling in the outer arch, and when it's done, it all looks smooth and ready for the Lycra to be stretched over the whole assembly. Using Lycra allows us to stretch the material over all the curves, cutouts and dimples of the original arch, whilst also bridging that 50mm gap without sagging into it too much. The front and rear edges are a little trickier, but after the application of some glue and some careful trimming of the excess material, the arch is ready for some resin. So for the fun bit, we need a plastic cup, a small measuring jug, a lollipop stick, some fiberglass resin, some hardener, a paintbrush, yellow is fine, and some latex gloves. I was more than a little concerned about the appearance of the latex gloves, but thankfully they're for nothing more nefarious than protecting his hands while preparing and applying the resin. With the paintbrush, we carefully spread the malodorous mixture over the entire arch, making sure it goes on evenly and into all the nooks and crannies. No point in rushing this, it'll pay to take our time and get it right. With the first layer of Lycra fully saturated with the resin, we've just got to wait for it to harden before applying the second layer. So, it's brew time. Tea.
Well, I've nearly finished my cup of tea, and the front arch still isn't ready for its second layer. But we've got all the same stuff to do on the rear arch, so we might as well be getting on with that while we wait.
While Nick gets on with preparing the rear arch, I'm gonna get the funk out.
Getting that rear arch right took up enough time that the front arch is now hardened completely. So, we've got to put a second layer on the front. We might as well do that now and then resin the two up.
Doing the second layer is exactly the same as doing the first. Stretch the latex over the arch, tape and clamp it into place, whack it back on the car and smother it liberally in reeking resin. That's the front arch with 2 layers and the rear arch with 1, all nice and dry. The next job is to cut out the front bumper recess, just roughly for now, pending the final finish.
2 layers of Lycra reinforced plastic have got us a nice structural arch, which is great, but because we've had to stretch the material in 2 directions, we've ended up with this sort of concave profile on the top, which we don't want. So it's time to break out the body filler.
2 things must you know about body filler. 1, it's really smelly, and 2, you have to be very precise with the proportions. So after carefully measuring out the 2 parts, it gets mixed up thoroughly and then creamed onto the arch. It'll take more than 1 application to achieve the profile we're looking for, so right now it's just whacked on to fill in the dip. While this round of filler is drying, Nick's going to put the second layer on the rear arch. Now he wanted me to make sure I showed all of this to demonstrate just how much work's going on, but quite frankly, sod it, it's dull. So, cut to the end product. There. And no, we didn't forget to resin the little patches under the clamp feet. See? Now anyone who's worked with filler will know that sanding it back is noisy, smelly and incredibly messy.
So that round of filler's got rid of the dip, but I'm not really happy with the transition. So we need a bit more filler and a profile tool.
We've got to fill that space between the arch and the profile tool with yet more filler. So it's time to slap on a shed load more, then use the tool to scrape off the excess and leave us with the desired shape. The final sanding is being done by hand because it's fine detail work and in no way anything to do with the fact that Nick totally destroyed the electric sander. Honest. After a very long and drawn out hand job, you end up with something like this. The profile looks pretty good from here, but the mess he's left is unacceptable.
Unfortunately, I haven't actually got access to a bear's arse, so I've compared this to Richard's and it's not quite as rough. But while it's not finished, I really don't want to spend any more time and energy making something that we might not use in the end. So I think for now, we'll just cover it in filler primer and leave it, at least until we get to finishing the car.
Oh, look at the artistry. With the filler primer applied, the offside arches are now complete. That's a lot of work, but the result I think has been worth it. Time to put the wheels back on and drop her down onto the show stands and check the tyre stick out. That's cheeky. That's perfect. So all we've got to do now is the whole thing again on the other side. Thankfully, I persuaded Nick not to show the process all over again. So now we can take a closer look at the finished arches.
Alright, they're growing on me, which is good news because, to be honest, there's a hell of a lot of work gone into these arches. I think they're probably as successful as we could have hoped for. They cover the wheels, they look like a factory arch, and they're only 50mm a side wider, which, if you use a bit of simple maths, tells us that the finished car is only 100mm or just about 4 inches wider than a stock Mini. And nobody out there saw that coming, because we didn't.
That is a mighty fine ass.
Now, I guess a lot of you are out there thinking, alright, arches are done, it's off to the body shop. Well, you're wrong.
God, here we go.
Now, depending on what sort of mindless, unlimited budget, 3-day build, over-dramatised bollocks you're used to watching on the TV, you could be forgiven for thinking this. However, that's not how we roll. We've got an awful lot to do before we get to paint.
Not half. We've got lots to do. And the first thing we're going to do is some plumbing.
Off you go then.
This is empty.
Jesus.
Well, it's all very well having a shiny new fuel tank, but at the moment we've got no way of getting the fuel from the tank to the engine. So today we're going to plumb it in. And after a trip down to our friends at Competition Supplies, they relieved us of hundreds of pounds in return for a load of fittings and hose. So we're going to start in the boot, and we've chosen this stainless steel braided PTFE hose to get from the feed and the return down the back of the tank to a bulkhead fitting in the boot floor. So first thing I'm going to do is measure the pipe. We're going to cut it about 2 inches too long to start with, and then we wrap it with some masking tape where we're going to cut it. The tape stops the braid from fraying out once it's cut, otherwise it's impossible to get the fitting collar over the top. So this is -6 line for the return, and when assembling these fittings, first thing we do is take the collar and make sure it goes over the top. After removing the masking tape, the next step is to peel back the braid so the olive sits down nicely on the inner hose. It's fiddly and the braid is sharp, so expect puncture wounds. Okay, that's sat down there nicely. Lastly, push the main part of the fitting into the inner hose through the olive. There should be a nice snug fit and not waggling around like a prick in a sock. Sat on there. Then pull the collar up to the fitting and screw it on. Using a very expensive special aluminium spanner, nip the fitting up nice and tight. So there's one fitting done, and here's one I made earlier. So that's -8 for the feed, -6 for the return. All we've got to do now is put 2 holes in the boot floor and fit the bulkheads. Now I can't get the step drill in here as there's no room, so I've drilled a couple of pilot holes and I'll have to go through from underneath the car. Of course I can't get to the underside of the boot floor without dropping all the suspension, subframe and diff out of the way. Still not enough room for my drill, so the radius arms come off and it's down with the platform. So with some serious contortions pulled, I can finally drill the holes ready to fit the bulkhead fittings. And the Dash 8 needs a 20mm hole, and the Dash 6 is being drilled at 14mm. With the fittings now in and tight, the hoses can go on before refitting the tank to set the final hose lengths. After wrestling with the tank for nearly an hour, we can now mark up the ends of the hoses and cut them to length before assembling the fittings. So with both hoses complete, the tank goes back in once more for a final check. The return line is easy to fit as it's on a 90-degree fitting, but the pump hose is trickier as it comes out straight and there's very little room above to swing a spanner. Still, we managed it and it all looks good. All that's left now is to figure out a way of stopping the hoses from rattling. Now we could go with nothing and hope for the best, or we could use self-adhesive cable tie pads and cable ties. We could use rubber-lined P-clips, but they're so last season. We could wrap them or cover the tank in foam, or we could spend a few hours making these charming little nylon brackets, because that's just how we roll. I must say, the time spent was worth it as it makes the job very neat. And of course, there's the ubiquitous captive nut plates to secure them to the seat back. Job done.
While Richie's getting his Super Mario on, I've got some more cage plates to sort out. You know, just in case.
Now, it's not our intention to fit a cage, but while the car is in this state, it seems churlish not to plan for that eventuality should the need arise. So it's been a while since he broke out the welder, and it's nice to see him in his natural environment. On his knees, bent over, with a mask on. As it turns out, even a gimp can fabricate some plates and weld like a boss. Nice job. These cage plates mark the end of the chassis fabrication, and while there's still a few holes to drill and some bits to sort, that's pretty much it. So, we'll leave it there for this episode. Tune in next time to see me use a pillar drill, and watch Nick get confused by the camera.
10.
Be sure to tune in next time for another exciting episode from the files of Project Binky. Make the noise